So, welcome to this first lesson where I'm going to be showing you how to make a nice, simple flax cracker. And throughout the first part of this course where I'm showing you the simple recipes, we're then going to move into showing you how to modify them as well. So I've got this beautiful, simple flax cracker recipe here. It's a little bit of a raw food classic, and I'm going to talk you through a couple of the finer points of this recipe as we do it. Okay, we're going to use the food processor for this. And the first thing I'm going to pop in there is our flaxseed. Now you'll notice in here that I've got whole flaxseed and I've got ground flaxseed. And I've just found that having a 50-50 mix between the two really gets a nice crispy, crunchy flax cracker. So you can go all whole flax, and you'll see quite a lot of recipes that use just whole flax. But when you grind down the flaxseed, you'll find them a lot more digestible. You can actually get more nutrition from them. So we're balancing up like the culinary, get the crispiness of the cracker, and we're balancing out that with the nutrition, right? Breaking it down and getting the proper nutrition out of the seeds themselves. So these are going to go into the food processor. We're going to go in with our tomatoes. Now, as you can see here, we've got two different types of tomatoes. We've got fresh tomatoes and we've got soaked sun-dried tomatoes. So the fresh tomatoes, I've just quartered those, no problem. The sun-dried tomatoes, as I said, I've soaked those for about 30 minutes to an hour. In warm water is fine, and then I've just chopped them roughly so that they don't end up in big chunks in the food processor. I really love mixing dried and fresh tomatoes in a lot of recipes actually. The flavors are so different, but you know, in this recipe, the fresh tomatoes are going to add water content so that everything mixes up. So let's pop those in. Next, we're going to go in some lemon juice. Now, you can start to swap out the different acids here. You could swap lemon juice for lime juice, or you could do apple cider vinegar. You could do orange juice. But in every recipe that we do, we want a fat, an acid, a salt, and a sweet. So as long as you've got each of those elements, you can start to swap out an acid for an acid or a fat for a fat. And we'll get into a little bit more of this when we're modifying the recipes later on in the course. So this is shaping up really nicely. Some really complementary ingredients now in terms of flavors, and we're building up kind of an Italian flavor here. So I've got a nice kind of small handful of fresh basil here. We're going to pop that in, and then I've crushed a garlic clove here. I'm actually just going to chop that up just a little bit further because we don't want a big piece of garlic in the recipe. So when I'm using fresh herbs, I like to use dried herbs. So this is a nice Italian dried herb mix. Next, we're going to go in with some fresh onion. Now, I know what you're thinking, that looks like a lot of onion to eat raw, but actually, onion dehydrates really well. It takes a lot of the intensity away from the flavor. And you might have even seen recipes that are onion bread, right? They essentially just use onion and herbs and maybe a little bit of flax. So we're going to be using this red onion. I like the flavor, I like the color of the red onion, but if you still think that's going to be intense, you could use maybe a sweet white onion, or you could use maybe a shallot, something like that. So I've done a rough chop on this, and that's going to go straight in. So the final thing we need to put in is a little bit of salt. So I've got my grey Atlantic sea salt down here. Again, just follow your recipe, taste it. If you want a little bit more salt, then feel free to add that in if you need to. And then you'll just want to stop it every now and then and scrape the sides down. Okay, so we're looking good. So I'm going to take my dehydrated tray with a non-stick sheet, and I'm going to put half of the mixture out onto my non-stick sheet and leave the other half for another tray. And the reason I'm doing that is because we want to get this nice and thin, so we don't want too much mixture on here. So you'll just want to take a minute or two just to spread that out as evenly as you can. Now you might be able to notice here I've got a little bit of a chunk of tomato. That's totally fine. It is going to make a difference when you score these though, which I'm just about to walk you through here. Okay, then you can neaten up the edges a little bit here if you want to. I wouldn't spend too much time neatening up the edges. You can just cut off any odd bits and use them in salads. But when you're pretty happy with that, we're going to score these, but we're not going to pull the knife across because of exactly what I just said with the chunk of tomato there. If you catch that chunk of tomato, it's just going to ruin your flax cracker. So what we're going to do with the knife is just go along and just make a kind of indentation, just pushing downwards all the way along. And you can make your crackers whatever size suits you. Turn those round. And then just neaten those up. And what you'll find is that as those dehydrate, as they dry, where you've scored, once it's completely dry, then you'll be able to kind of break them open. So that's going to go in the dehydrator just for a couple of hours until it's dry on top. And I'm going to demonstrate to you with another couple of trays here exactly how you're going to flip those over. So I'm just going to pop this down here and show you with these two empty trays how you actually flip those over, because some people can kind of get a little bit confused by that. So I've got an empty tray here. Now I want you to imagine that this is on here, right? So we've got our flax crackers on here. They've been drying for about 2 to 3 hours at this point, so they're dry to the touch. We're then going to take an empty tray, still with the mesh, but not with the non-stick sheet. We don't need that anymore. So we're going to turn this over, pop it on top, and then we're just going to flip the whole thing over, right? So then you get the situation where you can take away the tray, you can take away the mesh, and then you'll be able to peel away the non-stick sheet from the actual cracker itself. And then that cracker just on the mesh, it means the airflow can get all around it, and you'll finish it off 8, 12, 14 hours. They'll be nice and dry. I actually really like leaving them in there for like 24 hours. The longer you can leave them in there, the drier they'll get, the crispier they'll be. So we're going to do that with these. We're going to come back and I'm going to show you exactly what they look like. And this is what our simple flax crackers will look like after they've been dehydrating overnight. Ideally, I would dehydrate these just a little bit more to get them just that little bit more dry and crispy. But what you'll find is that after they've been in there and scored, you can just kind of crack them like that. You can also kind of do this with a knife. If they're not coming apart really easily, you can just take them off the tray like that, get your knife, and just go in there where you scored along and make a nice clean cut like that. So those are essentially done. I'd then just pop them back on there, dehydrate them for, as long as you can, get them really nice and crispy. So that's how you do a nice, simple flax cracker. Later on in the course, we're going to work on modifying these and making your own flavors.